Hey guys, it's me Nalthazar here, and this is going to be the second episode of Achieving Perfection for Ravnica at War Glory. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at the red-green node. So before we get into the explanations of the different cards and decks that I would suggest, I'm really quickly just going to show off the decks. So Chandra, the original Chandra is one. I'm trying to use just the Origins Walkers for people who are just starting out. So I would go with something like this. And then if you have access to more Planeswalkers, Koth is always a great choice for red objectives. So this is what I would use for Koth. And then for Bolas, I like Bolas 2. So I would suggest using something like this with Bolas 2. And then finally, the other really good choice would be some kind of Sarkhan deck. And this is what I would go with for Sarkhan. So now let's get into the meat of this. So we're going to go over here and take a look at the event. So the first thing to point out is that the red-green node is going to be really easy to complete objectives for, especially the striker objective. Dealing 15 or more damage in a turn is really, really easy, especially since you have to be casting creatures with power 5 or more. So it just means you have to get 3 creatures down, basically. So in order to complete one objective, you will be making progress toward the other. So pretty easy objectives for the most part, especially because it's red and green. So for the cast 4 or more creatures with power 5 or more, that's really going to be the harder of the two objectives because you need to actually cast the 4 creatures. So stuff like Killer Instinct, which just fetches them and puts them into play, will not count for the casting objective, whereas Sarkhan's third ability that fetches 3 creatures and gives them all full mana, that will count. So let's take a look at the decks. So for Chandra Roaring Flame, this is just if you don't have some of the other cards. So I'm largely targeting creatures that have power 5 or more. And so the creatures that I targeted here are Volcanic Rambler. This is an excellent choice because it has a very low cost. It might give you some really cool cascades and more mana, which will help you achieve other parts of the objective. True Fire Captain is great for this because it's got a lot of power for a reasonable cost, and it's an uncommon, so it's not too hard to get. You'll see that I included 2 mythics this time, but they're both event mythics, so as long as you're doing your Rising Tensions events, you should have both of these cards. Now, Lysolda is going to be a better choice than Agris Kos for the most part, because Lysolda is 11 mana. And so if you're stuck using a Planeswalker like Chandra, the first one, who doesn't have very good mana gains, then the lower cost, the better. Now, Agris Kos is really good because he's going to make it so that your opponents don't get any wacky gem conversion things going. And then he's also going to be increasing your creature's power, so that'll make it easier to kill. And if you've been chasing Origins, you'll maybe have access to this card. It's just like a second version of the Volcanic Rambler, so it's not going to cost a whole lot of mana, and it might cause a bunch of cascades, so that's really good. Now, just like in the other video in the series, you want to make sure that you have good access to control, and so Justice Strike I threw in for a few reasons. One, it's likely going to kill almost any creature. Most creatures have equivalent power toughness or greater power than toughness. But this also counts as dealing damage. So this will help complete the damage objective, and it's going to go ahead and get rid of a creature. And then Engrath's Rampage is going to serve as Vanguard removal or creature removal, and since it destroys the opposing first creature rather than being targeted, you don't have to worry about some of the hexproof things that might otherwise get in your way and might take you down. For support removal, I threw in Demolish because it's a great support removal card. And then for gem conversion, I threw in the Rakdos Gate and Gateway Plaza. So these are both gates, so as they're both gates, they're both going to work toward the plaza and, well, the guild gate itself. And so these will hopefully help you build up loyalty and also get you mana and prevent you from getting stuck. Now, Agris Kos definitely goes against that, so if you've got a bunch of gates down, don't play him unless you need the objective. So, yeah. I'd go something like this. If you took out Agris Kos for something else, that would be fine. Red doesn't really have any good access to card draw, especially at this stage, so that's tough. Now, if you do have access to more Planeswalkers, maybe you don't have all of the biggies, but you do have Koth. Koth is incredible, and I've been experimenting around a lot with swap. So with the standard swap, and I've found that I really like this triumvirate of creatures up top. So Niv-Mizzet Parun with Dragon Mage and Avaricious Dragon. So they all get benefits with card draw. And so Avaricious Dragon is going to be destroying gems. Dragon Mage is going to make it so that you're discarding all the cards that don't have mana in your hand. So all the cards that you haven't yet charged up, you won't lose anything that you've gotten mana for. And then Niv-Mizzet Parun himself is going to give you, whenever you cast a spell, you draw a card, but it's also going to deal 2 damage to your opponent every time you draw a card. So Niv-Mizzet is going to give you additional card draw, and that's really good for red because, as I just mentioned, red doesn't really have access to card draw, but it's also going to be dealing a bunch of damage, especially in conjunction with Dragon Mage. So the other really nice thing about these three is that you're going to be getting a lot of mana, and hopefully you're going to be getting a lot of cards. And so in getting a lot of mana and a lot of cards, you should be able to filter through what you have in your deck and play your 3 creatures. Now, if you're worried about playing the 3 creatures, go ahead and add a 4th. I like Ravager Worm because it destroys a land and it deals damage, so it can work toward that deal damage objective, and you can give it haste. So if you have it ping for 6 and then you give it haste from Riot over here, then that's 12 damage right there just for playing a Ravager Worm, and you might also go ahead and get rid of a land in the process. Nicole Bolas is in excellent Vanguard. So if you haven't picked Bolas up, Fiblethip is running today. If you're watching this some other time, then Fiblethip is not necessarily running today, and Bolas is not necessarily in Fiblethip's inventory. But if you have the chance to get it and use it. It's great. So the first ability is going to limit your opponent's hand size drastically. It's going to give you a bunch of extra card draw, which is something that red struggles with, and is going to pair very nicely with your 3 dragons. And if you just need to burn the opponent at the end just to get some extra damage for the objective or just for the kill, then go ahead and use your -7. And let's also not forget that if your opponent's playing a bunch of loyalty abilities, you're going to get a ridiculous amount of loyalty. And I imagine that you'll run into a lot of Koth decks here, so you're probably going to see a lot of loyalty abilities. So that'll be really good. Now, furthermore, we're going to need some gem conversion because Koth really needs gem conversion. And so with things like Dragon's Horde rotating out, we have to get a little bit more creative for things that produce just red. And so that's going to bring us to Plaza of Harmony and Guildmage's Forum. Now, the Forum you need to be careful about. So if you're playing up against another mono red deck, make sure that you swap out the Forum for the uncommon gate that I showed in Chandra. That one will serve the same purpose. It'll cost the same amount of mana. It's just that it could potentially drain 4 mana from your hand. So it's not as good as the Forum, but it'll still be fine. Then for the rounding out the deck, we've got Electro Dominance. This card is amazing. It should go in almost all red decks, and it's going to help you with the damage portion of the objective. It's going to serve as removal, and it's something that you can store up mana for, play defensively, and then benefit from the stored mana giving you mana. Engrath's Rampage, I've gone over. Having Vanguard removal is becoming increasingly important, and this one is excellent because it destroys creatures and Vanguards. And then finally Demolish, just for getting rid of pesky supports. Maybe somehow something weird happens and you have to play against a White Walker. And so in the event that that happens, you want to have support removal. And so this is what I would go for. Now, let's say you don't have the dragons, right? Let's say you don't have those 3 dragons. You wanted to go with something else. So Bolas the Ravager is a great choice. If you wanted to use the other Bolas, that's fine, but I honestly prefer Bolas the Ravager. I actually think that Bolas the Ravager is the best single Planeswalker in the game because you can kind of just win a game just on Bolas's abilities, regardless of what's in your deck. So this little triumvirate of creatures here, Zodek, Razia, and Rakdos is really good. You can use Etrata instead of Rakdos, and that's fine. I usually actually do use Etrata instead of Rakdos, and maybe I would actually go ahead and switch it, but I thought I would just show it off anyways. So Zodek is going to make it so that your opponent really can't play anything from their hand. It's just going to drain all the mana out of their hand. Razia is one of the best cards in Standard, and she blocks like everything basically. She kills it, and her prevent damage, and when you take damage, she burns. So she's just amazing all around, and she has haste, which is nice. And then Rakdos can be just a complete board wipe. So super great all the way around with those three. Now, apart from those three, you need card draw, and so that's where I'm running Finale of Revelation and Days Undoing. I prefer Days Undoing to Finale of Revelation here, because if you get off your third ability with Bolas the Ravager when he flips, really, it doesn't have the little flip thing here anymore. Well, that's unfortunate. Well, when you flip Bolas the Ravager, your third ability becomes your opponent can't draw more than one card per turn. So when you use Days Undoing, it just wipes their hand. And then if you happen to have Bolas Dragon God down and you use his first, your opponent's hand becomes 0. And so your opponent really can't do anything from that point forward, right? I mean, they're just locked, especially if you're using something like Razia. One creature is never going to get through Razia. So great choices. Then gem conversion is critical. So I'm running Steam Vents and Watery Grave here. I'm running both of these two because neither of them convert to green. And although Steam Vents converts to red, Watery Grave does not. So it will likely not be converting to your opponent's colors, just to yours. So I like using these two in this particular combination. And since they also both produce blue, that's another color that maybe you aren't going to see. Casualties of War is going to serve a purpose of massive board removal. So it's going to get rid of something of everything, and Death Sprout is going to serve as further removal while also getting your lands for gem conversion. I find that board removal is essential for achieving perfection over a long period of time. It takes out the likelihood of little like shenanigans things happening to take you down. Oh, here we go. Okay, so now I can flip it, and now I can show you. All right, so here, this. At the beginning of every turn, the support loses 1 shield. Your opponent can't draw cards. So, oh, it's not just the one. Yeah, they just don't draw them at all. Right, yeah. So your opponent gets to 0 cards, and then you just keep them that way forever. It's nasty. It's really nasty. You just basically win, because then, especially with the flip side here, the Bolas' Spark giving you 2 loyalty per turn, you're going to be getting a ton of loyalty, and in the event that you have this guy down, and your opponent's playing loyalty abilities, you're going to be stacking it up even more. So just concentrate on making sure that your opponent doesn't get any cards. You win. Game over. So Bolas Ravager, really good choice. And finally, the other one that I would suggest is possibly Sarkhan Unbroken. And so here you're going to see that I did throw in Atrata. And I like Sarkhan for this over Bolas in some ways, because this gives you access to Court of Calling. And so that lets you just fetch one of the creatures if you want. So it's kind of like having a 4th creature that costs less, still does the same job, and only counts toward the 3 creatures that you have. So you don't have to worry about sacking creatures or any of that. So it's really nice. Electro Dominance is here. I've already gone over why I love Electro Dominance so much. I decided to go with Finale of Revelation in this one because Sarkhan's mana gains aren't really too bad, and improving his blue mana gain is always nice. Then I've got Flood of Tears. I've gone over Flood of Tears too, but I love that this is just board removal. I feel like board removal is essential. You can also use the Great Aurora. That works, or if you want to use Casualties of War, that's fine. But I really like Flood of Tears here. And then there's Tamio. If you don't have Tamio, it hasn't appeared in Fiblethip yet, but it will eventually appear in Fiblethip. So at some point, you'll watch this and be like, oh yeah, I've already gotten this from Fiblethip. But this Vanguard is incredible. It's going to throw things in your graveyard and then let you play them for free. So playing free cards means that you're going to be achieving your objective a lot easier, and that's great. And then finally, I've got Nissa's Pilgrimage and Stomping Ground to serve as gem conversion. Now, you could argue that neither of those are converting to blue, and that's what you want for Finale of Revelation because you're going to be boosting your blue mana bonus, but you can play it however you want for this, right? So this is the other thing that I would suggest, and part of what I really like about Sarkhan, like I said, is if you take a look at that bottom ability, that Sangrite Overlords, it's going to fetch the next 3 creatures with power 6 or greater and give them full mana. So with that, that's really what I would personally suggest. If you wind up wanting to run a mono green walker, you can. I know that I'm a huge fan of Nissa, but part of why I don't like mono green for this is because there just aren't a lot of great options for creatures that have 5 or more power if you've got that bigger collection, and card draw, right? So the card draw is the other key piece, and you'll see that Koth excluded because Koth has amazing mana gains and can deal with this, but the other planeswalkers that I showed have blue, so they have more access to card draw. So yeah, green is okay, but it's really not going to be the way to go. Koth will be better than Nissa will be here, and also because you have the damage requirement, red is just better for dealing damage. So yeah, I would go with that. Then other cards that you could potentially look at as you're thinking of deck building. So really, ultimately, it's going to come down to what you have, right? So you want to build off of what you have. And so for me, I have most of the cards, so it gives me a lot of flexibility, but just go through your cards, see what you have, and build a deck that works for you. If you have some of the cards that I showed, if you have any of like the triumvirates of creatures, then go ahead and use them. Those 3 do crazy work. So either the Dragon 3 or the Razia, Zadek, and Atrata or Rakdos. Either way you go, you can't fail. They're amazing. So I hope this helps you achieve perfection. It's a pretty easy node as things go. So good luck, and I hope to see you in the next one.